My husband said I was worth less than a plane ticket, then he lost it all. The night my husband cheated on me, he didn't say he was sorry. He looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You're not worth missing a $900 plane ticket over." I remember that sentence more clearly than I remember our wedding vows. Because 3 weeks later, that same man was standing in my attorney's office, begging me not to sign a single piece of paper. But by then, I had already made my decision. My name is Claire, and for 7 years, I thought I was married to a man named Daniel who loved me. Apparently, I was married to a man who loved what I provided. There is a difference. Daniel and I met when we were 28. He was ambitious, charming, and the kind of person who could walk into a room full of strangers and leave knowing everyone's name. I was quieter. I worked as a project coordinator for a construction company outside Chicago, while Daniel worked in commercial real estate. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. We bought a small house. We traveled when we could. And every anniversary, Daniel told me the same thing. "You're my best decision." I believed him. Until the Thursday night when I found a plane ticket. It was sitting on our kitchen counter. Chicago to Miami. Friday morning. 1 passenger. Daniel. I picked it up and asked, "What's this?" He didn't even look surprised. "Oh, I'm going to Miami for a few days." "Business?" He hesitated. "Yeah, something like that." Something like that. That was the first time I realized something was wrong. Because Daniel always had an answer. That night he suddenly had none. I asked when he'd be back. "Monday." "Who's going with you?" "Some people from work." I nodded. But something inside me had already started screaming. Friday morning, Daniel left before sunrise. He kissed my forehead and said, "Don't worry, I'll call you." He didn't. Not Friday. Not Saturday. Not Sunday. On Monday morning, I finally received a text. "Flight got changed, don't wait up." That's when I stopped being confused. And started becoming suspicious. I didn't hack his phone. I didn't follow him. I didn't do anything dramatic. I simply looked at our shared credit card account. And there it was. A hotel in Miami. 2 champagne charges. A romantic dinner for 2. And a jewelry store. My hands started shaking. I called him. He answered after several rings. "Hey, Daniel, who are you with?" Silence. Then he said, "Why?" "Because I'm looking at the credit card." Another silence. Then he sighed. "Claire, you're making this bigger than it is." That sentence broke something in me. Not because I knew the truth. Because I suddenly realized he thought I was stupid enough to believe his lies. He came home Tuesday night. I was sitting at the kitchen table when he walked through the door. He dropped his suitcase. "Hey." I didn't answer. He looked at me. Then at the envelope sitting on the table. Inside was a photograph. Daniel. With another woman. His arm around her. Her head against his shoulder. And the same wedding ring he wore at home clearly visible on his hand. Daniel stopped breathing for a second. Then he whispered, "Where did you get that?" I said, "Does it matter?" He sat down. For the first time in 7 years, I watched my husband look afraid of me. "Claire, I can explain." "No." I pushed the photograph toward him. "You can tell me the truth." He stared at the table. And finally said, "Her name is Vanessa." I felt my chest tighten. How long? He didn't answer. Daniel, how long? About 8 months. 8 months. 8 months of birthdays. 8 months of dinners. 8 months of him telling me he loved me. 8 months of sleeping beside me while loving somebody else. I asked the question I didn't even want answered. Do you love her? He looked at me. And that was when he made his biggest mistake. Yes. I stood up. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I simply walked upstairs and packed a bag. But before I could leave, Daniel followed me. Where are you going? Somewhere I can breathe. You can't just leave. I turned around. You already left. He stared at me. And then, incredibly, he got angry. He told me I was being dramatic. He told me our marriage had been unhappy for years. He told me Vanessa understood him. Then he said something I'll never forget. You know what, Claire, I'm not missing my life for you. I stared at him. What does that mean? He pointed toward the suitcase. I'm supposed to fly back to Miami tomorrow. Vanessa's there. I already booked the ticket. I couldn't believe it. You're leaving again. Yes. You're choosing her. I've made my choice. Then he looked at me and said, You're worth less than a plane ticket right now. I felt something inside me go completely still. I looked at the man I'd loved for 7 years. And suddenly, I didn't recognize him. So I smiled. Not because it was funny. Because I finally understood. Okay, I said. He looked confused. Okay. Yes. I walked downstairs. And I did something Daniel never expected. I didn't beg. I didn't threaten him. I didn't ask him to stay. I opened my laptop. And I started reading our financial documents. Because while Daniel had been busy planning his new life, I'd been building the old one. The house was in both our names. But the investment account, mostly mine. The retirement contributions, mine. The small consulting business I'd started 2 years earlier, mine. And there was something else. A prenup. Daniel had forgotten about it. I hadn't. Our lawyer had made sure that if either spouse committed adultery and abandoned the marriage, certain assets would remain separate. Daniel didn't know the details. I did. The next morning, he flew to Miami. I filed for divorce. 2 weeks later, Vanessa stopped answering his calls. Apparently, the perfect relationship wasn't so perfect after all. Daniel came back to Chicago. But this time, he wasn't carrying confidence. He was carrying panic. He showed up at my house. Claire, please. I stood behind the door. What? I made a mistake. I almost laughed. You made a mistake for 8 months. I love you. No, Daniel. He looked at me. You love what you lost. He stepped closer. I can fix this. You can't. Then he told me Vanessa had left him. She had apparently found out he had been lying to her too. Daniel had told her he was basically divorced. He wasn't. He had promised her they would move to Miami. He couldn't afford the life he promised. And now he wanted to sell our house. Except there was one problem. The house wasn't going to save him. Neither were the investments. Neither was my money. Because the divorce agreement had already been reviewed. His attorney called mine. And suddenly, Daniel realized exactly what he had thrown away. A few months later, the divorce was finalized. I kept the house. I kept my business. And most importantly, I kept myself. Daniel had to sell his expensive car. He moved into a small apartment. The job he'd bragged about for years was gone after his employer discovered he'd been using company expenses for personal trips. The woman he cheated with was gone. The lifestyle he wanted was gone. And the wife he thought would always forgive him. Gone too. The strangest part happened about 6 months later. I was sitting at a coffee shop when I received an email from Daniel. It said, "I know I don't deserve a response, but I need you to know I'm sorry." I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed one sentence. "I hope someday you understand that I wasn't worth less than a plane ticket. You simply failed to understand my value." And I never replied again. Today, I still have that plane ticket screenshot saved on my phone. Not because I'm angry. Because sometimes you need a reminder of the exact moment your life changed. Daniel thought a $900 ticket was more valuable than his marriage. He thought I would stay because I'd stayed before. He thought cheating would cost him nothing. He was wrong. Because losing me wasn't the punishment. The punishment was realizing, far too late, that the woman he treated like she was replaceable was the one person in his life he could never replace.